again. Alright, so this is the Aftermath Show. We're going to be talking about a few things tonight. UFC's first ever stadium event. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Do you get my thoughts on that? We're going to be talking about Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 3. We talk about Paulo Costa's next move, whether or not he's going to stick with the UFC, whether or not he's going to go elsewhere. And then lastly, we're also going to talk about José Aldo's retirement. So let's recap the events from the main card. And starting off, we had Tyson Pedro picking up a quick TKO victory against Harry Hunsucker. That vicious body kick and punches that he landed to follow up. And look, he came out the gate straight away, utilising his range. And Hunsucker didn't really know how to approach the situation, you know, because of Pedro's size. He was so much bigger than Hunsucker, even though Hunsucker cut down from heavyweight. It was just a huge factor in that fight, and you know, it's gutting for Harry Hunsucker because he's not had a great run in the UFC at the moment. Whereas Tyson Pedro, he's been a bit up and down, hasn't he? You know, and but I've got some great fights for him. I think you're going to enjoy this. Smash a like on the video if you haven't done so already. Let us know, you know, if you enjoyed his performance and whether or not you think you know, he should move on and potentially challenge a lot tougher guys than Harry Hunsucker. My first option for him is, I think you guys are going to love it. I think he should fight Kennedy Nzechukwu. Now he's 10-3 as a professional. You've got Tyson Pedro, who's 9-3 at the moment, and Nzechukwu is coming off a win against the kickboxer in Carl Robertson, and that was back in July at RDA versus Fiziev. He's actually bigger than Tyson Pedro, believe it or not. I think he's got 2 inches or 1 inch height advantage over Pedro, and I think he's got a couple of reaches on him as well. And he will look to sort of take Pedro down and kind of rough him up on the floor. It's going to be intriguing because obviously Tyson Pedro is very good on the ground. He's got a couple of submission victories already as a mixed martial artist. His stand-up's really good as well. So all in all, you know, it's a challenging fight, I think, for both guys. 5 submissions and 4 knockouts for Tyson Pedro. So, you know, whereas I think Nzechukwu, majority of his fights have been by a TKO, I believe, and he's just kind of ground and pounded people out. Let's have a look now. Just going to get it up. 7 knockouts out of 10 wins. So, you know, he's 1 win in his last 3, which isn't too bad. And you've got Tyson Pedro on the same hand, who's, you know, coming up on a 2-fight win streak, but he was out for a long period. So I think that fight makes sense. And you know, if you're aware of both of these guys, let us know in the comments whether you think that's a good fight for him, or you know, whether you've got something else. Do let us know. Ash, let us know. Give us a message if it's a laptop mic or whether we got the sound on here. Yeah, I was just seeing in the chat there. Let's move on to another option that I've got for Nzechukwu. And I struggles to say this guy's name every time. Nicolau Negumereanu. He's 13-1 as a professional. He's less likely. I think it's a less likely option though, personally, because he's on a 4-fight win streak. He's looking pretty impressive himself. But then, you know, I guess at the same time, you've got Tyson Pedro, who's actually fought some really tough guys. You know, he's got a win against Paul Craig, who's mentioned the weekend. He's fought the likes of Ilia Latifi and kind of these kind of veterans of the game. So, Mauricio Shogun Hua being one of them as well. So, you know, maybe that fight does make sense, and maybe the UFC will look to make it happen. Negumereanu is coming off of a TKO win at UFC 277, which was literally just around a corner as well. So timelines for both of these matchups make sense. It's going to be interesting to see whether Tyson Pedro gets a quick turnaround. I would like to see it. It makes sense when you've come off an impressive display like you did at the weekend. I think we should probably move on. And for Harry Hunsucker, though, I've not really got anyone for him. Personally, I think he's going to get cut. I think it's safe to say I don't think he's had a win in the UFC. I think it makes sense for him to part ways with the UFC. Daniel Burkhard. Sorry about the sound, buddy. We've got it all going now. Bit of a mad rush so far tonight. Lots of content, of course. We gave you guys Nathaniel Wood last night, and what a Q&A that was. But yeah, let's move on then to the second fight of the main card, which was one which was a bit surprising. I think a lot of us weren't excited about it. It was surprising because it just came out of nowhere. It was bumped up to the main card quite last minute. It was two women's bantamweights that probably not many people have heard of. But nonetheless, it was the Czech Republican Lucie Podolva moves to 14-7 now as a professional. She fought well against a strong woman. She was struggling to kind of connect on Yanan at times. But she got the takedown off of a scramble. As soon as she got the mount position, it was raining elbows from there, man. Raining elbow all over the place. And she got the TKO victory in the second round, which was, very, very impressive. I've got one option for her, and I think maybe you guys would like it. I think it kind of makes sense. I was wondering, sitting here to myself earlier, I was thinking maybe perhaps you get paired up with someone coming fresh off the Contender Series. But at the moment, we've only had one women's bantamweight who's been successful to get a contract. And I think her record is like 9-2 or 9-3 at the moment. So I think it would be a bit more of a rush for her to fight someone like Pudilová. For Pudilová, I'd like her to fight someone like Jessica Rose Clark, who is 11-8 as a professional. So she's obviously, she had quite a lot of experience under her belt, as well as Pudilová. Pudilová, of course, is on her second stint at the UFC back. She got that win at the weekend. She went away after losing at UFC on ESPN. It was Blades versus Dos Santos back in 2020. She went away to another organization, won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 7 of her fights. Oh wait, have I counted like that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, out of 6 fights. So she's back in the organization, and look what a display putting on your return. And yeah, I think someone like Jessica Rose Clark would be great, but she's on a 2-fight losing streak. She's slipping down a little bit. She just coming off of 2 submission losses back to back. It kind of makes sense with Pudilová returning to the UFC, in my opinion. This is why I've got this one in there. She's only got 5 finishes out of her 14 wins. So she's not much of a finisher, even though she got it done at the weekend. Whereas, for Jessica Rose Clark, on the other hand, she's had her ups and downs with the UFC herself. She beat Jocelyn Edwards, who's looked pretty impressive lately, by decision. She lost against Jessica Ai. She beat Paige Van Zandt back in 2018. It's probably her most impressive win, alongside Beck Rawlins. I think just these two should probably pair up next. That's the only kind of really options that I've got. If you can think of anyone else, let us know in the chat below. Sound is perfect here, says Daniel. No more echo. Thanks, my man. Thanks for touching that. Super stuff. Smash like on video if you haven't done so already. Let us know what you think about these matchups. We're going to move on to the third fight of the night, which is probably the fight I was actually most looking forward to, being a José Aldo fan. Unfortunately, he fell short of a unanimous decision against Merab Dvalishvili. 2 judges scoring it 29-28. I think that's how I scored it. I thought I gave, maybe it was the second round to Aldo. And one judge scored it 30-27. So I believe that all 3 judges, it was correct for all 3 judges to go 30-27 in favor of Merab. But look, Merab, he did what he needed to do to get the win, really, at the end of the day, didn't he? He kind of got in Aldo's face early, which we said at the start during the breakdown. He kind of smothered him. He was relentless with the takedown attempts. He was attempted 16 times and was unsuccessful every single time. But look, he did enough to wear on José Aldo. He made José Aldo try to work and get out of the position. And,
to me, it wasn't a great performance for Aldo. I felt that Aldo probably should have performed a lot better against Merab. There was a lot of instances where they broke away, but I think he was very hesitant at times, because of the takedown threat. And I think it was because of that. And of course, as time goes on, when Merab starts to wear on him a little bit, his cardio was starting to drain a bit. And I think he was kind of trying to be a bit reservant of that. Try not get overzealous in there. And to be honest, looking back at Aldo's performance, it's kind of like similar to the way that Rose fought Carla Esparza in a way. Because Rose Namajunas was very sort of gun-shy against Carla because of the threat of the takedown. It's kind of similar in this fashion, of course, but Merab was unsuccessful. I think that Merab had his moments. He had his moments of flashiness. He did look kind of good. He landed some solid strikes on Aldo, and that's pretty much was enough to get the victory, in my opinion. But what is next for both of these guys? For Merab, guys, let us know if you guys had some thought. Daniel says Aldo was kind of in half-speed mode, almost no leg kicks. Mate, same. Literally, I was expecting more leg kicks from Aldo this time around as well. We started seeing vintage Aldo in that Rob performance last time out, and myself and I think a lot of fans out there as well felt that Aldo could get the knockout in this fight, I think if he was able to do that, slow Merab down on the feet, get him a little bit hesitant in initiating the punching range, that he could close the distance and grab a hold of Aldo. Because Aldo's leg kicks are so fast, man. There was no way of Merab catching them. He would have to be on point. But look, I mean, it's easier said than done, isn't it? At the end of the day, Merab's an absolute killer. He's relentless in what he does. He's a cardio machine. And look, even Ash is in there. He says, yeah, Aldo didn't look great. He didn't. He should have had a better performance. But before we get on to what's next for Aldo, there's some options, of course. There's two potential options. I'll mention one. Later, we're going to talk about one, which has come in the new segment. But in the rankings then, we should probably address the rankings properly in this one, because it's the only one that's kind of had a movement, or one of the only ones that have had a movement on this main card. Merab moves up to number 3, so he's getting closer to the top spot now, whereas Aldo moves down into 6, which is kind of, unfortunate. It's kind of fair in a way. But for Merab next, I think there's only one fight, personally. I mean, okay, there's probably 2 in there. I guess you could... We discussed it at the weekend, but I think this is my most favourite option. And I think he should get the winner of Yanan versus Sean O'Malley. The Yanan fight would be so intriguing. The fact that Team Sarah Longo have already got a win over Yanan, I think they would love to do it again with Merab, for sure. Merab offers something a little bit different to Aljamain Sterling. His cardio is much better than Sterling's, and I think would be a lot relentless in this fight, more so than Aljo. Of course, Aljo's, I think, striking is probably a lot better, but Merab's got this Sambo background, man, and it's difficult to get to deal with, and I can see Yanan really having a struggle with it. We saw Yanan struggle with Aljamain Sterling's wrestling. Imagine what things would do once Merab grabs a hold of him. I can see Yanan going down, and Yan's got good takedown defense. And yeah, I'd actually favour Merab in that fight. I really would. It would be a nightmare one, but I think it's pretty much one of the only options for Merab, to be honest. If O'Malley beats Yan and I don't think he will, but who knows in this game? We've been full of surprises already this year. If he does get that win, he moves from 13th up to pretty much the top spot. I would imagine that Yan would drop loads. Well, not loads, probably just a bit. But I'd imagine that Sean O'Malley would probably go in at number 2, and TJ Dillashaw would probably move up to number 1 spot. That's where I reckon. And then, I don't think that Sean O'Malley would fight Merab. I really don't. I think it would be beat Yan and then hopefully get a title shot, because the UFC will probably want to hurry him up, because they're paying him big money already. So, and he's only down at 13th. The only other circumstance that could happen would be whether or not, and it's a big if, and I don't know if any of you have maybe considered it. What if Aljamain Sterling was to pull out due to injury the TJ Dillashaw fight? Mate, it's copy paste. If your team's Sarah Longo, put Merab in there. I know it makes things difficult if Merab beats TJ, because obviously the UFC probably would want to do an interim title fight. How would that play out? Would you think that would happen? Do you think Merab will actually step up in that situation? If the UFC turn to him, and he's the only man available. Because look, Corey Sandhagen's booked against Song Yadong. I'm not sure when that fight is. That fight, I think, is September 17th, which is quite some time away. I guess it depends on how Corey Sandhagen does, really, against Song Yadong. Because the title fight with Dillashaw and Sterling is going to be at UFC 280. That's going to be in October. So it depends on the timeline, really. If Sterling pulls out tomorrow, then you got probably maybe Corey Sandhagen stepping in again, I guess. I don't know. It'd be a difficult one for the UFC. Or maybe it would be Marlon Vera. It probably makes sense for Marlon Vera to go in. Yeah, I guess that's probably another shout. I think a lot of fans would probably want the Marlon Vera option, I'd imagine. Moving on then to Jose Aldo. Now, I've got one option. We're going to talk about potential retirement a little bit later on, but personally, I don't think he should anyway. I think the only fight left for Jose Aldo is Dominic Cruz in Rio de Janeiro in January. Make it happen. Yes, Cruz is coming off of that devastating knockout loss against Marlon Vera, but look, January maybe is enough time to recover from it. Fingers crossed. Not sure what the UFC brass or Dominic Cruz would say about that. But it would be interesting to see. I think it should happen. I think both guys should just retire afterwards, have a retirement fight. I think it'd be great. I think it'd be great for Jose Aldo. He kind of deserves it. He's up there with one of the best, or if not the best, in the featherweight division. Have your last fight in Rio de Janeiro with all the fans. I think that's a perfect way to go out. For Cruz, I don't think he'd be bothered where he retires or when he retires. He might even continue. Who knows? Okay, so that's that. That's a wrap on the bantamweight division. Then I think we should probably move on to the co-main event. Paulo Costa versus Luke Rockhold. Was kind of looking forward to this fight. These guys, well, both of them had been out for quite some time, I guess. Costa's not been as active. He's been more active than Luke Rockhold, of course. Sticky putting this fight as a co-main event, in my opinion. But look, it was a complete back and forth war. 100% fight of the night. Well deserved. They got their bonuses. Both men sort of emptied the gas tank in that fight pretty much after round one. I was kind of shocked after round two because I thought it felt like it was round three. There's a few stoppages in that fight due to low blows. And look, I was shocked that we were going into another round. But Costa sort of turned up, hungry and motivated. So did Rockhold as well, to be fair. We did see a group, a newly improved Luke Rockhold from previous outings. He looked motivated. And, he took Costa's best shots in that fight. He came in much better shape. So did Costa. And look, Costa, man, he looked on another level. And personally, I think it's because he was trying to make an impression, right? Last fight on your contract. Again, we're going to talk about that a little bit more detail a little bit later on. Was he kind of, trying to flutter the UFC a little bit and kind of be like, look, I put on entertaining fights. I'm a nightmare in this middleweight division. Pay me what I should be paid. And look, let's continue working, perhaps. But we'll get into that in just a sec. But, if he does continue with the UFC and signs a new contract, I've got one fight for him. And it's the one I remember best from talking about it during the watch along. I think Ash may have had other options as well. Of course, Costa beating Luke Rockhold doesn't move him in the rankings at all. But look, you've got 6 versus 7 there. Sean Strickland, make it happen. Costa versus Strickland, man. That is the fight to make next for Costa. We have a lot of hype behind it. It would be dangerous, I think, for Costa if he gasses after the first round against Strickland, because that's when I think Strickland would then look to take over in the fight. It's got to be a fight night headliner. If it's a fight night headliner and it's 5 rounds, I can bet the money on Sean Strickland. Bet the money on Sean Strickland. Because I think he would be able to steal a decision. Or maybe get Costa out there in the later rounds if he's able to push Costa and make him work. But there's a caveat to that. At the same time, it's whether or not Sean Strickland is going to be the same after that Pereira knockout. You know? I think the time frame maybe might make sense. It was, I think, 2 months ago now since he got knocked out. You know, maybe towards the back end of the year could get kind of announced. Maybe, depending on the contract situations, of course. But look, I think that is the fight to make personally. Moving on, then. I mean, for Luke Rockhold, there's no option. He did hang the gloves up after the fight. He said he's pretty much done to Joe Rogan. But personally, I said this during the watch along, I felt that he needs to at least have one more. You know, he did have some time away. To fight the number 6 guy after having time away in a war like he did, I think it's pretty impressive, you know? Again, like I said, he looked hungry. It was whether, like I said in the watch along, to me, it felt like a similar situation to Ioana Jędrzejczyk, where she'd been away for some time. She'd declined a lot of fights, may have had one foot in and out of the door, and I kind of felt that Luke Rockhold was in the same sort of position. But, you know, and look, there you have it. He also retires. So, yeah. I think he needs to fight Chris Weidman. I think that's the fight to make, because both guys have been in slippery slopes in the last couple of outings. They've both not looked great. Get that grudge match out of the way. It would be an epic rematch. Chris Weidman kind of made that mistake where he went for a spinning wheel kick and Rockhold took him down from it, ground and pounded him out to win the title. I think there's a story there to be made, and I think that should happen before he retires. But I think we're here at the main event already, guys. We're here at the main event already. Smash the like on the video if you haven't done so already. But yeah, if you think of any other options, let us know. Let's discuss it in the chat. The main event, mate, where do I start? Where do I start with this? Leon Edwards picking up that 5th round head kick knockout. And look, first round for me, he was looking great. You know, it was looking amazing. He was able to turn the ties on Usman, stuff the takedowns. You know, he was the first person to ever take Usman down in MMA period. It was off of a scramble. Edwards was able to take the back, and it looked like he was going to be able to submit him in the first. And, you know, unfortunately, Usman done a good job at really protecting himself in that situation. You know, props to him for fighting it off and running the clock down. So it was great. It was like, yes, from a UK fans' perspective, it was like amazing. 1 round into the bank. Let's go. Same again, Leon. Stuff the takedowns. Get a bit more flowy and into the striking a little bit more, and then we could cruise. We could cruise through this fight. But look, it wasn't to be. Usman was just relentless with the takedown attempts. You know, he was able to kind of take him down as Leon was starting to kind of fatigue a little bit, and as the rounds were going, it was like, okay, Usman's got that 2nd round. The 3rd round's got to be crucial now, Leon. Let's you know, get one back. Wasn't great. 2 more takedowns in that round. And look, by the end of the 4th round, the fight had slipped away. You know, it wasn't looking good. I was deflated in there. So was Ash. I was just thinking, look, just end this fight now. Usman's won it. Let's just move on. Go to bed. I mean, we had a fan cam, of course. Let's give Chris, shout out to Chris, by the way, for an epic fan cam. You know, we gave him his time. See Chris, go to bed, and let's just wake up feeling fresh and daisy. And you could see during the reaction in the watch along, you know, I think I looked down at one point. It's always typical. You know, I've been missing these knockouts quite a lot. I'm just an easily distracted kind of person, really. But yeah, it's just, I think I looked at my phone or something, and then Ash reacts, and then I'm just reacting off of his reaction. So I'm like, whoa, what the hell has happened? And it took me a few seconds to actually register what had happened. And then next thing, I see Usman on the floor, and I'm like, what? How has this happened? Like, it was standing, nothing was going to happen. It was Usman in the last minute, just had a minute left to secure the win. And look, that head kick knockout, mate, never seen anything like that. I mean, people are kind of talking about it as being maybe one of the biggest upsets. I don't think so. And look, Leon Edwards continues to get disregarded as a fighter. It's not an upset. I don't think it is an upset. An upset would be somebody... Would be like a Juliana Pena, you know? I don't know. I think there's bigger upsets. Matt Serra versus the GSP was much bigger, really. Because Matt Serra was coming off of the Ultimate Fighter. He was on a bad slope, right? And Leon Edwards racked up how much of a win streak? Like a 9-fight win streak. So, you know, you think, is it really an upset? If he was on that run, he was due a title shot at some point. I guess it is in some ways, because if you consider Kamaru Usman as a pound for pound, number one, then yeah, that's a fair argument. But yeah, I don't know. Personally, the way it sits with me, I don't really see it too much of an upset. I think I kind of just want to support Leon and give him the moment, really. It's not really, you know, shadow doubt over an impressive thing, because it wasn't a fluke either. You know, if you think it was a fluke, get that idea out of your head this instant, because look, he set that head kick up beautifully, and yes, props to his corner for firing him up during that just right before that 5th round. Because look, if he didn't, then I don't think it would have happened. He set that up so well. He feinted with the 1-2, and then look, he caused Usman to dip his head to the side, and that head kick was flush, man. You couldn't get any flush as that. But yeah, I mean, there's not much to talk about in terms of what's next. I think it's pretty much obvious what's going to be next. They're going to run it back. There's going to be a third fight, which kind of now leads us on to what's been saying in the news, the MMA media. So let's move on to that show. Okay, we're in. So the first headline, I think makes sense to talk about this right now, is Khabib Nurmagomedov has come out after the loss, Kamaru's loss, and he reckons he's unsure if Kamaru Usman will be the same after that knockout. He says after such a knockout, a lot of people don't recover. It is kind of true in a way. You know, we've seen it a few times in the past. Now, I've got a few examples, but there's counter arguments to them, of course. For instance, you've got Ronda Rousey. After she got head kicked by Holly Holm, she never returned the same again. But then you can also argue that Holly Holm was then entering really, really tough women's fighters at that period. You know, not to say that the women previously weren't tough at all. Of course they were tough. But when you've got someone like Holly Holm, who's a champion in boxing, who'd trained, you know, all her life in kickboxing and boxing, then, you know, and Ronda was never the greatest striker. You know, it kind of made sense that she was going to have that kind of downfall at some point in the career. And of course, Amanda Nunes, power puncher, never fought a power puncher like Nunes before. And Nunes is somebody who mixes everything up well. So that's the kind of counter arguments for that. But still, you know, you could say she wasn't the same again after she came back from that. Another one I want to throw in there would be Rashad Evans when he got knocked out by Lyoto Machida. He was never the same again. Okay, you know, maybe injuries was the downfall of his career. You can also argue with that. And the fact that after that loss, he did kind of go 2 wins on the bounce. He defeated Thiago Silva, and then he defeated Rampage Jackson as well, and then kind of hit the decline a little bit. But, you know, these knockouts do happen, and people aren't the same again. Especially with clean ones like Leo, the one we saw at the weekend. So it's going to be interesting to see whether Kamaru Usman... Because, again, going into the third fight, he's going to be gun-shy, you know? He's going to be maybe a little bit more tentative. He's going to be a little bit more wary of where he's placing his head, which could be even more dangerous for him, you know? It could mean that Leon's got more time to kind of set his strikes up better and maybe land more on the feet with his hands. But I'd imagine, I think, third time round, I think Usman gets the takedowns. I think he does. And it would be the same story, but I don't know. Leon's got to kind of up his game a little bit as well, though. You know, maybe more cardio, more strength training, come in there, just, I don't know, bigger. But then at the same time, he's going to be suffering a little bit with the weight cut. So, you know, there's pros and cons to it. Don't know, man. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a very good third fight. I can't wait. But yeah, a quote from Khabib in this article, he says, "I'm aware that the trilogy is already in the works. I believe he can beat Leon Edwards, but after such a knockout, a lot of people don't recover. It will be interesting to see, but I would love to see the trilogy. They're 1-1. So look, I think a lot of people are now down to watching the trilogy. Let's see. We got a comment here from Daniel. He says, Din Thomas was way off with the he is a broken fighter comment. Oh, really? Oh, that's kind of a really. I know. I've heard inklings of this that apparently Usman's got injuries and things like that he's suffering with. I don't know. I've not really seen too much of it. Yeah, I've still got a few more podcasts to catch up with this week to get some more juicy insider info. But yeah, I don't know. Nothing else. And also Daniel says Ronda's boxing skills were hyped up too. Yeah, they were way too much. And look, that was the downfall of her. She just ran into legit strikers. Let's move on then to another story. Let's move on then to the fact that Merab Dvalishvili says that Jose Aldo retired after the loss at UFC 278. Now, you know, Jose Aldo his English isn't great at all. And we would have expected a similar scenario to Luke Rockhold, where, you know, we would have seen him take the gloves off, maybe speak to Joe Rogan and actually announce it. But we didn't see it at all. But according to Merab, he reckons that Aldo said to him, I guess I'm done. Obviously, English is, like I said, is not his best. So, you know, maybe that's taken a little bit differently. But Merab said, I think this was during the MMA hour, he said, when he was down and I went to shake his hand and tell him, thank you so much for the fight, and I go to respect him, he was down and I tried to help him and he was telling me, he said, that means this is my last fight. Okay, so there you go. Because it was my last run to title. Dvalishvili said, and then he said, I guess I'm done. So look, you know, like he goes on to say now, it was a very emotional moment. Obviously, he's very gutted he lost. He felt, for some reason, Aldo felt that he won the fight. You know, and he said, that's why I was talking to him. I said, you're amazing. You did so much. You don't have anything to prove. You're a legend. You're a king. I was a little heartbroken. So, look, you know, Merab saying he was a little bit heartbroken, the fact that, you know, he was Aldo's last fight. I'm not really buying it. I think Jose Aldo will be back. And like I said, it'll be the Rio card. It's got to be. You know, I think emotions got the better of Aldo during that fight. That's what led him to say that. But again, it gives you an insight as to where Jose's mindset is at. He's clearly had this thought coming on now for some time that this is the last title run. And, you know, he's not getting any younger. You know, why would you put your body through so much pain in kind of going through another title run at your age? It's not great. I'll get to Daniel's comment in just a sec, towards the back end of the socials. But yeah, that's my opinion. I think Aldo will be back. It'll be UFC Euro against Cruz. Let's move on then to the third story. We've got, is it up on screen? Paulo Costa comes out and he says, and this is Ariel Helwani talking to him about his contract situation. And he says, I have one more fight on my contract. Yes, I'm looking forward to being a free agent. I will not lie to you. I'm on a high level fighting the best of this division. And my contract is too old. When I fought Marvin Vettori, I got $35,000. So, and look, that was a headlining fight as well. But let's not to add, I miss weight. You know, maybe we could have got a little bit more in there. Yeah, I think, in reading this last little bit, it kind of adds to it a little bit. You know, Dana apologized to him because of the alteration with USADA. If you don't know what happened, USADA knocked on his door very early in the morning when he was going through his weight cut process, and obviously wanted to test him, which isn't great. But Dana apologized to him and said to him that it will never happen again. And look, in some ways, it's sort of Dana being kind of like, trying to butter Costa up a little bit, trying to maybe potentially get him to re-sign. Because there's so many more exciting fights, I think, for Paulo Costa. And I honestly don't think we've seen the best Paulo Costa yet. I think there's more to come from him. I think he's still fairly young as well in this game. If I just have a look now, it's going to be interesting to see. He's only 31. He's got a few years left. I think it makes sense. There's so many more fights. Like I said, he's not fought the likes of, as I mentioned Strickland earlier. He's not fought Robert Whittaker, of course, one of the best in the division. You got maybe Darren Till if he gets back up in there. Maybe Pereira, or Derek Brunson as well. He's not fought Brunson, I don't think. So look, plenty of options. I hope he resigns. I really do. But if not, maybe he'd be sort of enticed to go elsewhere like bare knuckle or maybe PFL, because apparently PFL is the place to go to at the moment. We saw Shane Burgos, of course, go there, and he's a stud. Let's move on then to the last story that I've got in the news. Number 4 here. This is the big thing, the big topic we want to talk about. Because UFC boss Dana White suggests that Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman will compete their trilogy at Wembley Stadium after previously ruling out a British Stadium show, which he did. I think it was the last UFC London. He said a lot of things about that. And look, he said, how do you not do a rematch? And he mentioned Wembley. I don't know. He did a White profound before confirming Edwards versus Usman 3 will take place in the UK. So, I mean, look, Dana's made a lot of these statements straight after fights. The UFC don't always go through with it. So, look, personally, and I'm not hyping myself up too much. I don't want to get too much excited about this. But he said, I'm scared to go outside, and I'm definitely scared to go outside in England, which is fair enough. The weather over here is very choppy. But look, we've hosted big boxing fights over here in stadium shows when the weather's not been that great. So, look, if Eddie Hearn can get it sorted, I'm sure Dana White can get it sorted. Maybe Eddie Hearn, they had an alteration back in March. Maybe he's trying to persuade Dana White that he should do it. And I think Dana could be persuaded. I do. But look, I'm not getting my hopes up. He said, but at the same time, he was kind of said, I'm serious, but joking about Wembley. So I don't really know what he was on about there. He said, anything is possible in England now. It would be fun, but scary at the same time. The weather isn't the greatest. So look, the weather is giving Dana anxiety, and I kind of get it. I think it's doable. I do. Like, now that Leon is champion, it makes sense, because at the same time, how do you feel that card, though? I think you need to obviously put a lot of Brits on. You'd expect Paddy Pimblett to be on it, but look, they've taken Paddy. They want to use Paddy for pay-per-views now in Vegas. So maybe wouldn't be at Wembley. You've also got, Darren Till's a bit wishy-washy. He's in and out of fights. He's, always injured. You've got Tom Aspinall, who's currently recovering from knee surgery. He's going to be out for some time. If there is going to be a Wembley event, I think to be safe, the UFC would want to do it in the summer. But the UFC calendars have got to move on. I don't think they'll want to hold up the welterweight division just for a stadium show in the UK. So you're probably looking at, early 2023 for a show. Or we got a comment here. We got Angus. Yes, Angus. He says, hello from Lithuania, JK. Mate, you get around everywhere, my man. I'm impressed. He says, Usman Edwards 3 will be in Cardiff. Mate, it's not. I mean, look, to be fair, I laughed at you when you said that to us back in July, right? And part of me was doubting Edwards, I must admit, because, look, why wouldn't you? Against Kamaru Usman. Cardiff does make sense, but is it a good geographical location for the UFC in Wales? I don't know. Of course you got Jack Shaw and people like that, but there's no stars from Wales to fill it. People from the UK making the trip to Wales, I think, would be a bit of a struggle. So travel-wise, I think is the only sort of downfall for making that fight happen. Totally with it, man. You know, close the roof is perfect. But, you know, I think these are the circumstances we're dealing with. And Angus says January 2023. Oh, is that what it's called now? I thought it was called Millennium Stadium. Okay, it's called something else now. Principality Stadium. 74,500 seats, roof and heated stadium. Oh, well, there you go. January is possible. It is. I can't see it, man. I can't see it. The UFC is stubborn. And look, Dana's stubborn. At the same time, it would have to be a pay-per-view event. Regardless, it has to be. A title fight, it's got to be pay-per-view. But the UFC just don't want to do pay-per-views across seas anymore. I mean, well, okay, granted, Singapore was an exception. The weather was good. They managed to sort it out time-wise, but even that event was a bit, I don't want to say a failure, but fighters struggled because of the time that they were fighting at. You know, people were jet-lagged and we didn't get the best performances. And the main event proved that. Yeah, it's just a bummer with pay-per-view sales. But I think Dana needs to make that gamble. I really do. I think Dana needs to make the gamble because, look, the sport is thriving over here in the UK. They've had 2 back-to-back shows in the space of a few months over here in the UK. You've got to let that grow now. You've got to continue that growth. And look, now's the time for it. Angus says, I think it would be a travesty if they didn't do Usman Edwards 3 in the UK. And the O2 is too small, in my opinion. Yeah. Look, to be honest, as a channel, I don't know what we would do if they did go to Wembley Stadium because like it's a historic event for UK MMA. I want to be there. But at the same time, we got to keep the watch-alongs going for you guys at home, especially you guys in the US and Canada, our friends and fans over there. We got to keep this going, so we would have to work something out. For sure, definitely. But you know, we'll wait to see. Fingers crossed. Let's keep praying for it. And look, who knows what could happen? You know, hopefully Dana keeps keep asking Dana that same question. Maybe we can get it. All right, okay. I think we're ready to wrap this show up. Thanks a lot for the comments in the section there. Much appreciated for you guys hanging out and listening to the Aftermath show. Don't forget to hit a like on the video, of course. Stay tuned. We've got more. We haven't got an event this weekend. But stay tuned, we've got some more content hopefully coming your way. And of course, don't forget to follow our socials as well. Stay classy, guys. We'll see you next one. Ciao for now.